Walaikum Assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're going to be beginning with our Seerah class number 2, and then once we are done by inshallah 11 o'clock, as much as we can get done by 11 o'clock, fine. And then after that, we'll continue from 11 up to 12 o'clock with the tafsir class. And inshallah, today we'll be doing Surah Nuh. As you guys remember, we have done Surah Nuh before at Masjid Qurtuba. Like in the series where we did all the stories of the prophets. That's when we, alhamdulillah, managed to finish the Surah Nuh. But like just with like we did with Surah Muhammad, how we went through it one more time, we'll be doing it again, inshallah. So let's begin our Seerah class. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد رب زدني علما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم فقهنا في الدين اللهم انفعني بما علمتني وعلمني ما ينفعني وزدنا علما. Last time we were looking at how was Arabia before the Rasulullah was born, before the time of our Prophet, peace be upon him, before his birth, and some other generalities we went into. So we're going to do a brief revision, go through a few points that we discussed last time, and some of them might be new, some of them might be repeated. So we know that there were 300 idols both inside and outside the Kaaba, right? And when the pilgrimage would come for when the people would come for pilgrimage, they would take some stones from around the sacred area back with them. So that's how people were adultery was like an addiction, and people also had portable idols. So that was the norm that time, and they believed norm in the sense just to show you how corrupted the world was, just to show you how distorted the beliefs were, how far away man had gone from his real purpose, the purpose for which Allah made the earth, the purpose for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made human beings, how far away this man has drifted from its original purpose. And they believed that another distorted belief was that and that the same belief that you find today when they do some kind of a shirk, and this is what their explanation for shirk is, people today. And what was the reason for the people back then? The same one. They said because they believed that Allah could not be approached directly, and that these idols were the mediators between them and Allah. So that's mentioned in the Quran. And later on, this idolatry went on and it became like an organized religion with the invention of certain religious customs. It was declared that certain crops and animals must be dedicated for the idols. And another thing that they had was they did not believe in the life after death. Why? If you do not believe in life after death, there is no accountability. You can go on living like how you wish, how you feel like. All these are major. All these are shirk, and shirk is a major sin. So, and another one was that they also believed when you have rituals, they made these made up rituals as you go along, you start making up your own rituals, and then they start becoming like an organized thing for you, organized religion, so called. And so what happens was then superstition, things like that start coming from there. One wrong would lead to another wrong. The masses believed in all sorts of superstitions, and many people believe that the soul of a murdered victim floats around in the form of an owl until it is avenged. Fortune tellers and astrologers were regularly sought for advice and for luck. Featherless arrows were labeled and cast like dice in order to decide serious matters like whether to travel to a certain place, to marry a particular person, or even to wage war. These arrows, so there's something like that, even in what's called the Native American culture. I heard the other day that so they were like wanderers, that they wanted to have a land where they could settle in. But what they do was they had something like what's called like a holy pole, a stick, a holy pole. So wherever they would stop for the night or stop for the time being, they that whole that stick, they'll put it in just in front of their tent or whatever, and whichever direction they'll do that at night. In the morning, whichever direction that stick lean towards, that's the direction they would start traveling. till they said that, they were the next morning they woke up and they found that the stick hasn't moved, it's that stayed firm in one place, like, standing upright. And then they would stop and they'll start living, that this is the place that's been chosen for us to continue living. That's how they. Now, how is this different from when they talk about the featherless arrows? That's exactly what people did. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made human being, the best of form, and He wants us to be like to rise up. And human beings, they have this tendency to just keep falling back and taking. Allah has given us human beings their intellect, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the fitra to recognize Allah. And what do people do? They use all this mundane, this regular things, and they try to seek divinity from that. And so they also, the Arabs at that time, before the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's arrows which were cast in the name of certain idol, had even been used to determine who a child belonged to in case of adultery. Look at that. The all-knowing arrows. Auzubillah. Why are we looking at all these values and morals of the people at that time? That, if you look at what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was able to achieve, this becomes even more important, like in the degradation and the kind of how worse humanity had become. So from there to make it the best, that journey it's just so impressive. It cannot have been from anybody, and like a regular human being. It had to be a prophet of God. That's why it's so important to understand the background. But the Arabs possessed a few excellent qualities as well. So why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had, the prophet, the last prophet could have come from anywhere in the world, but why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose these Arabs with such, this kind of beliefs and some kind of this kind of morals they had? Why? Because they had some excellent qualities. They were extremely generous and hospitable, going out of their way to take care of guests. Courage was highly praised virtue, and they would fight till death if they were convinced about an idea. The Arabs had a strong sense of loyalty, particularly to their family and tribe, and they possessed a firm will and lived a simple life. So, and but along with that, they had a firm will and lived a simple life. So if they're not, what they needed from the life was very simple things, so that when these people were given a big mission, they could focus on it. If you live a simple life, it helps you seek higher purpose, seek higher goals. Otherwise, the things like if you live a very the kind of lives people these days, they have the extreme comfort and extreme luxuries. What do? They weigh you down. They keep you just stuck to the ground with all this luxuries and stuff like that. And you do not want to remove yourself from the comfort zone, so you're not going to go ahead and sacrifice if there is ever a need to sacrifice for your higher purpose. And these people, because they had a simple life, so they could also, and because of their simple life, it was possible for them to take the message far and wide. But aside from these few noble traits, these morals were not much better than their beliefs. So the beliefs were bad, so the morals were bad as well. Drinking and gambling were rampant. Compounded interest on loans known as usury were common. It made the rich even richer and exploited the poor. So the exploitation of the weaker section of the society. Now, of course, that will include women. We'll see. So if an unfortunate fellow who took the loan could not pay it back, the interest would kick in, and now he owned even more. Even if he died, the debt would be transferred onto his family. So we have seen that even when you saw slavery in US. So this is how, if and in a lot of other cultures as well. So these exploiters, they will keep slavery running in generations because of, and they'll use anything as an excuse. In this case, this is somebody who took a loan from them. In other cases, it could be something else. Women in general were looked at as inferior beings unless they came from a noble family, and when a child was born, parents would openly express their discontent if it was a girl. The Arab mentality felt that a boy would grow up to earn money for the family and be able to fight a case of war, whereas a woman could not. Some fathers would even bury the girl alive out of fear of poverty and without any social censure. And everybody was doing that, made it right. A woman could never inherit, neither from her husband nor from her parents. A man was allowed to have as many wives as he wanted, and women could never petition for any type of divorce. So the women had no rights. Prostitution was common and became an accepted social norm. This is what? Objectifying women. So, and one way in which a marriage took place was that a prostitute put a flag on a house and allow any man a free visit. Later, when she became pregnant, she would call every client that visited her to decide which one of them looked like the child looked like. Whomsoever she chose would take her as a wife and would be allowed and would not be allowed to refuse. So one of the six objectives of objectives of the Sharia, the things that the Islamic Sharia, the rules, the do's and don'ts came to protect. One of them is the protection of lineage. If you look at what the Arabs were doing before Rasulullah was born, at the time of ignorance, at the time of Jahiliyyah, this is mockery of lineage. What lineage are we talking about? If this was what was happening, and it was socially acceptable, and a very good people could read or write and had any formal education. The only science worth mentioning was poetry, of which the Arabs were masters. However, even their eloquence was misused because they used poetry for self-praise, and it was of no good. It didn't raise them, did anything to their intellect or for their own betterment. And this is also important because when it talks about the eloquence of the eloquence at Arabic poetry, the Arabic language, it's not a random happening, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to reveal his last holy book in that language. So this is why it seems like there's no, when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes no mistakes and there's no coincidence. So this is all according to the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this was what some of it we have discussed last time, and this age was called the age of arrogance. What was the state of the other religion at that time? So that the Arabs they were idolatrous. They followed, they were polytheists. What about the other religions? So at that time, and it's not just Arabia, but the whole world that was in the age of ignorance. Judaism was marked by overemphasis on formulaic rituals and outward piety, while many rabbis misuse their authority and become corrupt. Whenever a religion is going to go away, like from its originality, or that means what Allah's mother wants it to be, what happens is people start focusing more on the rituals than the spirit. That's when you know that the religion, that's the downfall of a religion. So can we relate these days? If you look at Islam, how many people are, they say, more into the text than the spirit? So in the or the rituals or the outward piety, then actually having fear of Allah, actually being righteous. That was the case with the rabbis that time as well, and they misused their authority and now become corrupt. Deliberate alterations had crept into the books which were revealed to Prophet Musa, and racial superiority became a fundamental tenet of the religion. Racial superiority in the sense what? The Bani Israel, those people, they are, what do they call that? The Gentile? Yeah, so these are more superior than anybody else. Christianity did not fare much better. The true teachings of Isa had become so corrupted that he began to be worshipped alongside God, alongside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they made Isa into God. The doctrine of salvation gave the green light. In Christianity, the doctrine of salvation gave the green light for people to follow their base desires while believing they were forgiven. The concept of, the concept of Trinity, it was so complex and mysterious, and this concept, the concept of Trinity was adopted, where they made one God, three gods into one, which they could never explain. And what this was Christianity and Judaism. And in Persia, what was happening in Persia? Many Arabs in Yemen had temples to worship fire. In Persia and in especially Arabs in Yemen. Socially, they had no fixed code of morals. And Buddhism in India and Central Asia had become idolatrous as Arabia and had statues and shrines dedicated to Buddha. Brahmanism in India was so idolatrous that their gods reached in the millions, which still they do. Well, people were divided into separate social classes based on their family background. This is what happens when you have a man-made religion. When you have man-made, there are chances of, even when we have a God-sent religion, as long and it's not practiced the way it should, then exploitation happens. When you have a man-made religion, it's always the people who are making the religion up. If they're going to make the what's called the laws that favor them, and and how they could continue their power over other people. And that's what you see in all the religions so far that we are talking about. The lowest group, so the Brahmanism in India was so idolatrous that their gods reached in the millions, while people were divided into separate social classes based on their family background. The lowest group was eternally designed for slavery in order to serve the highest group, who were treated like gods. It exists in India today as well. And that means for thousands of years that's been going on. The world was virtually in a state of chaos. The message brought by previous prophets like Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, who were sent by Allah to reform mankind, had become utterly corrupted. Men and women had forgotten Allah and couldn't tell the difference between right and wrong. But Allah had not forgotten His creation. So out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He kept sending down prophets and He kept sending down His books. So looking at Arabia geographically now, Arabia covers about 1,000,000 square miles of desert. It's the largest peninsula on earth, and the peninsula is surrounded by water on 3 sides. The region is sandy and mountainous and therefore mostly unpopulated. There is scarcity of water and the climate is very hot and like we all know. So this is why many towns exist only where there are sources of water, while the wandering Bedouins are nomads who travel from place to place wherever source of hydration is to be found. This is very important. Why? Because you see, right, what made the Kaaba get established where it is, Mecca get established where it is? Water, Zamzam. So, and this harshness of Arabia in terms of its climate and scarcity of water and all of this, it made it difficult and unattractive for any major empires to even consider conquering Arabia. What was the benefit? It was so hard to conquer it in the first place, and for what? So by the 6th century, the two major powers were the Romans known as the Byzantine Empire to the west of Arabia, and the Persians known as the Sassanid Empire, which also controlled Yemen. These were, so the Arabia was surrounded on one on the east by the Persians, on the west by the Romans. And the Byzantine Empire, they have colonized the lands of Egypt and Syria. And the Sassanid Empire, which had Persians and Yemen. Most of the Arabia had never experienced any foreign occupation and remained primitive. So their language, it also remained primitive. You can call it primitive, we call it pristine. So because of it remaining in that, because of no influence from outside, so much so they were so protected from outside influence that they say that they had to borrow foreign words for everyday terms associated with civilization, like the rest of the civilization, with the terms like coin or lantern, jar, cup and basin. So Arabic had no words for them. They had to adapt these words from some other language, and there was no central government or rule, and it was a pretty dangerous place. What can you expect? What can anybody expect from such a primitive and backward area? What good can be what good could be expected, right? And what happens? Look at now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about his birth. First of all, lineage. Lineage being an important consideration in the Arab society, the Prophet's family tree is very well documented. He was born into the family that traced its ancestry back to the Prophet Ibrahim through Ismail. So why is Ismail important? Because Makkah, right at the beginning when it got established, like people started living for the first time there, it was Ismail al-Salam, the mother of Ismail, Hajra, the wife of Ibrahim al-Salam, that Ibrahim al-Salam left Hajra and an infant son in that valley. And then how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped, and that's how people came and then they started living. So but the lineage of Rasulullah can be traced right back up to the beginning of humanity, or establishment of humanity in that area. The Prophet's father was Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim, and the list it goes on, but we are going to that this is enough for us. And the Prophet's mother was Amina, the daughter of Wahab bin Abdul Manaf bin Zuhra bin Kilab. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam belonged to the tribe known as Quraysh, the most respected tribe in Arabia. And around the 5th century, from the leaders of the Qurayshis, Qusay ibn Kilab. He led a revolt against the tribe of Khuza and managed to retake control of Mecca. So the members of this tribe, known as the Quraysh, were direct descendants of Prophet Ismail. By the 6th century, the Quraysh enjoyed a position of honor among the several tribes scattered around Arabia because they took care of the Kaaba. So honor, people seek honor. Honor comes from service. So these people, they became an honorable. The Quraysh were honored. Why? Because what did they do? Because they took care of the Kaaba and the pilgrims that would come to visit. They would feed the visitors, give them shelter, and organize trade festivals where people could do business. That's how Makkah became a magnet that attracted tribes from all over the peninsula to come for worship, even though it had now become a place of idolatry. So the tribe of Quraysh consisted of many different families or clans. The family of Hashim was now among the most prominent. Abdul Muttalib, the chief of the clan. Abdul Muttalib is the grandfather of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The chief of the clan became the unofficial leader of the Quraysh in Mecca. He had many children, but one of his favorite was Abdullah, the father of a prophet, peace be upon him. It was predicted that he would carry on the legacy of his father, but it was not to be. Abdullah married Amina from the Zuhra clan. A few months later, on his way to Yathrib, Yathrib is the present day Medina, which is to the north of Mecca, he became ill and passed away, leaving his wife pregnant. Amina gave birth to a son on Monday in the month of Rabi al-Awwal in the year 570. Notice no date is being mentioned because there's a debate on what date it was, and people celebrate Maulid, and they say that's the Prophet's birthday or the date of his birth. And even there is no consensus among the scholars, the people who have written his biography, the people, the Muhaddis, what was the exact date. There's a difference of opinion, and people are celebrating Maulid like they know for sure. The child, had you known for sure, even then it would have been wrong. The child's grandfather named him Muhammad, which meant the praised one, a rare name in Arabia. It was a custom in Arabia that the infants of the noble families be brought up in the desert with the Bedouins. Some tribes had a reputation for nursing and raising children, like the Saad ibn Bakr, where Muhammad spent his childhood. There was less disease, and the pure language was uncorrupted by urban living. A child would grow up to be tougher, and there were less immoral influences than in the city. Muhammad grew up in the household of Halima, who was his foster mother, and learned the ways of the desert. He would visit Mecca every few months to see his own mother, Amina, only to return to the desert again. Eventually, he was returned to his mother a few years later. Little Muhammad was from one of the noblest families among Quraysh. The Arabs preserved their family trees very carefully because it was an important consideration in their society, and Muhammad's lineage was well known through his 21st parental grandfather, Adnan, who was one of the prominent descendants of Ismail. All of this is mentioned where some of them is from Sahih Muslim, and some of these are mentioned in Bukhari. After a short while Muhammad was only 6, Amina became very ill and passed away while mother and son were on a journey. Muhammad, now having lost both mother and father, was taken care by his grandfather Abdul Muttalib. He treated him like his own son. In fact, he allowed Muhammad to sit next to him on his special seat in front of the Kaaba, a privilege which his own children did not enjoy. However, when young Muhammad was only 8, he also passed away. So the grandfather also passed away. It was his uncle Abu Talib who would raise him from now on. Abu Talib loved his nephew very much and would even take him along when he journeyed to Syria and other places for business. However, Abu Talib was not very wealthy like his father. So Abdul Muttalib was wealthy, Abu Talib was not. So Muhammad had to work to earn a living and help his uncle. He began his career as a shepherd, taking care of the flocks of sheep and goats for the people of Makkah. A shepherd, they say that there was not one prophet who was not given the job of shepherding herd. Why? Because a shepherd learns a great deal of responsibility. He must guide the sheep together as a group and protect them from predators at the same time. It and also he is also responsible. He takes care of the herd, whether it's the most vulnerable, the most the smallest goat or whatever animal is there, to the most powerful, the most useful one. He must guide the sheep together as a group and protect them from predators at the same time. It also teaches the shepherd patience and gives him much more time to think and reflect away from the excessive noise of the city. Many of the prophets sent by Allah to other communities were known to be shepherds at some point in their life because a person's occupation has great effect on his personality. This is so important. A person's occupation has great effect on his personality. So if you're a teacher, that's your profession, you will see they say that you're not never, you are always teaching everybody. If you're a preacher, you have this preachy personality. Also, if which is important, like people they are in the game, like for example, gaming. People make gaming softwares or in the gaming community. What do you think would happen to their personality? So it's very important that you choose your career very carefully. Due to the tribal nature of the society, people in power were able to get away with crimes against those in weaker positions. Once a merchant from Yemen came to Mecca and was cheated by one of the noble men of Quraysh named Al-As ibn Wail. The man pleaded with the leaders in Mecca, but Al-As and his clan were too well connected. Finally, some influential men felt sorry for him and decided that something must be done. This event occurred shortly after a war that raged between the Quraysh and another tribe. Many people were tired of warfare, so a few leaders assembled together in the house of Abdullah ibn Judan and formed a pact where each leader would stand up for the weak and oppressed, regardless of how powerful the oppressor may be. It was called the Pact of Excellence or Hilf al Fudul. They went to the criminal and forced him to return the merchandise to the victim. Muhammad proudly took part in this pact and used to praise it throughout his life. So this is very important. See, whenever there's some kind of an oppression happening, the oppression happens because some people are bullies, some people have they got corrupted because of power and things like that, but they are able to do whatever they are doing is because of the silent majority. People are allowing them to do by remaining silent. That is their tacit approval. Their silence is their tacit approval. Islam, we have, the gist of the hadith, if you can stop oppression, if you can stop an evil, you stop it with your hand. If you cannot, then with your tongue. If not, I read somewhere, at least with your glance. Yeah, and if not, then you feel bad in your heart. But the thing that you should do is you use your full power. What is hand? Using all that you could possibly you could use to stop from people oppressing the people who are weaker. So you just cannot be a neutral spectator. There's no such thing as a neutral spectator. When you think you're a neutral spectator, you are an oppressor because you're approving the person who's committing this crime. And Rasulullah Sallam didn't want to be from that. And you can see he's not even a prophet yet. He's a regular good person. And this is what he does. It was well known that Muhammad was one of the few who refused to worship idols from a very young age. Others were even Khatija radiallahu the first wife of the Prophet, and and even Abu Bakr Siddiq. They said that and there were a few other who used to refuse to worship idols from a very young age. Rasulullah Sallam would visit the Kaaba but direct his worship only to Allah, although there were so many idols there. It was common practice to touch a certain idol while going around the Kaaba and praying. But Muhammad used to skip that part. Like while going around, circumambulating, you just touch the idol or touch See, subhanallah, you go to mausoleums, people in the Muslim world, they're doing that over there, going around in tawaf and touching stuff. And Hindus, they worship in the same way. He also abstained from eating any meat that was slaughtered in the name of an idol. That's haram for us to eat, right? Anything that has been slaughtered in the name of other than Allah. However, he never openly protested against idol worship and mostly kept his beliefs to himself. After shepherding for a few years, he took interest in trade and became a businessman who traded people's goods for them. Most noblemen among the Quraysh were merchants by profession. However, Muhammad stood out from the rest due to his honesty and sincerity. He quickly became known in Mecca as Al-Amin, the honest one, and he was known for his high morals, chaste character, and avoidance of wine, gambling, illicit relationships, and other vices. A wealthy lady named Khatija hired him to trade her merchandise in Syria for her. He was to receive a percentage of commission from the deals. He performed the task with such precision and honesty that she later proposed to marry him by sending one of her friends to ask him if he was interested. She had received many proposals after her second husband had died, but she refused all of them. However, she saw something special in Muhammad and was taken by him. Muhammad had to raise the needed money to pay for her dowry, which was about 500 dirhams. He was 25, while Khatija was not only quite older than him, but she had been married twice before. See, again, we know many people say that she was 40 and he was 25 when they got married, and so there was a distant difference of 15 years of age. Again, we don't know that for sure, because there's a difference of opinion as to what the age of Khatija radiallahu anha was, but she was older than him, and that's good enough for us to understand. This did not deter him through though this did not deter him though, since she had all the qualities he could ask for: a righteous character, noble lineage, beauty, and wealth. Muhammad and Khatija were married and eventually had 6 kids, 2 boys and 4 girls. Both boys died in their infancy, while only one daughter outlived their father. Like the 4 girls, they grew up to be grown ups and get married and have children, and but then they died before Rasulullah in his lifetime. They died in the lifetime of our Prophet Sallallahu, except for Fatima Radhiallahu, who died after Rasulullah had passed away. Yet the 2 boys were destined to be substituted by 2 others. A young boy named Zaid bin Harisa was separated from his family and ended up in Mecca. Muhammad and Khadija decided to adopt him, and he became known as Zaid ibn Muhammad. The word ibn means son and is commonly found in most Arab names to indicate lineage. Yeah, a few years later, there was a famine in Mecca, and this proved to be very difficult, especially for Abu Talib, who had to support a large family. In order to ease the burden on him, Muhammad and Khadija took one of his sons, Ali, into their household and raised him as their own child. Thus, they became a happy family of 8. How's that 8? 4 girls, the parents, and Zaid and Ali. Around the time Muhammad was 35, the Quraysh faced a great challenge. The Kaaba was on the verge of collapsing. It had been damaged by major flooding and was desperately in need of repair. They finally decided to tear part of it down and rebuild it anew. It was agreed upon by the leaders that only pure money would be used, not wealth earned from usury, prostitution, or theft. So, see, look at the Arabs. As bad as their morals were, when it came to building the Kaaba, they still had some decency in them, some goodness. They proceeded in their task and rebuilt the walls until it was time to put one of their special stones, known as the black stone, back in its place. This stone was special because it was the final stone to be placed by Prophet Ibrahim and was a marker for many from where pilgrims should start their worship. We do that to this day as well. Each tribe demanded that they should have the honor of replacing it back in its position. The argument became so severe that war seemed imminent. One determined clan, the Abdadar, brought a bowl filled with blood and had each family member dip their hands in it, signifying that they were willing to fight to the death. They allied with the Adi clan and refused to budge. There was a stalemate for several days and a war was about to break out. However, an elder among the Quraysh suggested that the next person who comes to visit the Kaaba would decide who gets the honor, and everyone agreed. The Quraysh identified the man who was walking towards the Kaaba and they shouted, Al Amin, the honest one, it's Muhammad. They were happy that it was someone they held in high esteem. If it was anyone else, he probably would choose his own clan for the honor. But instead of favoring his own family, Muhammad appeased all clans by asking for a sheet. He placed the black stone on it and had one leader from each clan hold a side of the sheet while they all carried the rock to its place. He then replaced the stone himself and the reconstruction was completed. War was averted through a policy of compromise. However, the Quraysh ran out of clean money and shortened the dimensions of the Kaaba, leaving it more cubic than rectangular. For the missing part, a low semicircular wall was put in the place of the original structure to mark the boundaries. We call it Hatim these days. So Hatim, not all of Hatim, but some part of the Hatim is considered a part of the Kaaba. Like if you pray there, it's like you're praying inside the Kaaba. They raised the walls higher than the original building was and placed a roof over it to prevent thieves from entering. The Quraysh also raised the door of the Kaaba several feet above ground level so they could control who could be allowed to enter. So we will stop here. Inshallah, we'll continue next time. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. stop the recording and then we'll begin again with our tafsir inshallah.